And we're live. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. It's Tom, Erica, and Josh. And yes, Harvard has decided to defy President Trump and forego potentially billions of dollars of federal funding. That opens up some broad questions. Why are we giving money to Harvard in the first place?
Ding, ding, ding.
Number one.
Addressing, I think I do want to address in this episode, the best argument for is that it funds some groundbreaking research. How do universities get funded? And maybe people should be taking the Hillsdale option, kind of the OG of foregoing federal funds. But we have a lot to discuss there. But before we get into that, Erica, what else are we talking about today?
We also have the New York Times discovers that maybe Ritalin is not the best answer to ADHD. Really interesting story out of New York Times there. Things that everyone should probably know before they put their kid on medication. Also, homeschoolers are facing invasive government oversight regulations in the great state of Illinois, land of Lincoln. And the Catholic Bishops' Conference withdrew its opposition. So we will dig into that and what's going on in the middle of our country.
Yeah, my mother-in-law has been begging me to talk about that on the show, or my wife by proxy, Illinois, definitely freaked out about that. And I'll tease this a little bit. I had the opportunity to speak to some college students at Marion University here in Indianapolis. Absolute pleasure. I want to get into a little bit of what we discussed, and I think it was a great experience. But before we do that, we have to talk about our sponsors. So shout out to Charity Mobile. It's the pro-life phone company. When you switch to Charity Mobile, 5% of your monthly plan price goes to the pro-life, pro-family charity of your choice at no extra cost to you. It's everyday living made effortless giving. It's time to make the switch. With the same nationwide coverage as the major carriers, Charity Mobile has a variety of plans to fit every need, from basic talk and text options to unlimited data, and you can get up to 8 lines. They offer a range of phones, from simple flip phones to the latest 5G smartphones, or you can bring your own compatible device, no contracts, no termination fees, and a 30-day guarantee. So there's no risk in giving them a try. Charity Mobile has been in business for nearly 30 years, providing U.S.-based customer service by phone, chat, or email. So why not buy the way you believe and support causes that matter to you with your everyday phone use? New customers can get a free phone after instant credit, plus free activation and free standard shipping with the promo code LOOPcast. Thank you to Charity Mobile. They've been a wonderful sponsor of ours for a while. Please go check them out. And I'm also happy to talk about in the education realm, we are also sponsored by University of Dallas. In a world where people can often feel alone or like nothing really matters, the University of Dallas is different. It's a place where students build strong friendships, grow in their faith, and work hard to learn important things, all while searching for truth, wisdom, and goodness. The University of Dallas alumnus, Brian Burch, is responding to this quest in an extraordinary way. Donald Trump has nominated him as ambassador to the Holy See. The University of Dallas applauds Brian for his personal witness, advocacy, and the great work he has been called to do. As University of Dallas President Jonathan J. Sanford stated, Brian is a man of deep Catholic faith, strong character, and genuine prudence. We could not be prouder of him. Learn more about Brian's alma mater, the University of Dallas, and join Brian's fellow alumni who are praying for him during his ongoing nomination process by clicking the link in the description below. Thank you, University of Dallas, a fantastic Catholic institution. Speaking of Brian, Josh, you had some news on him?
Yes, the nominee to be the next ambassador to the Holy See, our own Brian Burch, has joined a new illustrious club. He has a protester outside his house.
Whoa, that's next level.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I mean, I said to Brian, this is such baloney. I'm totally jealous. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I tell everyone I'm from Petoskey. I even mentioned the street I live on. My kids are freaking out that I'm doxing us, and then Brian gets the protester, not me. I mean, come on, what kind of this is?
You're basically begging for protesters to show up at your house.
Bring it on, come on.
Mercer, when Jehovah's Witnesses show up at your door, do you invite them in, sit them down, and have a long conversation?
Yeah, I can see that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and my son, Charlie, one time, he was ready to go to war with them, By the way, that's actually the thing. I figured out, some apologists gave me a little trick on that with Jehovah's Witnesses. Female Jehovah's Witness, I said, would you like to say the Lord's Prayer with me? And she goes, no. And then she left, because women are not allowed to pray with men, I guess, in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Oh, really? These words that Jesus gave us, this prayer is not good enough. We wanted to say it. I'm like, oh.
You know how people,
Jesus prayed with
Josh,
women.
you know how there's blacklists or blocklists from hotels, or casinos? The Jehovah's have an equivalent of a big red X over your house over there.
Do not visit.
I don't know. The 9-foot tall statues of the archangels tend to be a bit of a hindrance.
Yeah, absolutely. And a special warm welcome to everyone joining live in the chat. Shout out to you guys. 11 a.m. Eastern, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We got a great show prepared for you. And Erica, you did a lot of research on this, but so the main top line is Harvard decided to take a stand against the Trump administration by not acquiescing to their demands. I'd like to, if we could, get into the specific demands, Harvard's response to those demands, and then a little bit of the funding conversation as to what this means for Harvard.
Yeah, so this week, the Trump administration's Joint Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism, which includes several federal agencies, including the DOJ and the Education Department, they announced a freeze on $2.2 billion in multi-year grants and $60 million in multi-year contract value to Harvard. And to break that down a little bit, or actually, let's just go back down the timeline. So back in March, these agencies announced that they were reviewing $9 billion in pledged government contracts and grants for Harvard, and to see if the college was actually in compliance with federal regulations, specifically with how they handled the anti-Semitism on campus during those protests that we covered last spring. You remember those? They were at Columbia. They were everywhere all over the Ivy Leagues. And multiple schools are getting this kind of an audit to see if they're in compliance with federal regulation to continue receiving federal funding. So on April 2nd, the Department of Education sent a letter of demands to the Harvard president and Penny Pritzker of Pritzker fame, who's the head of the Harvard Corporation.
Really?
Related
to, I believe Trump said rotund JB Pritzker.
Yeah, that's one word for it. He's practically
Chris Christie looked like a male model, I think was the other part of that truth.
Okay. So here were some of the demands.
So much
money. Okay. Pritzker.
So much money, though.
We could get really hung up on this. All right. Here were some of the demands.
Go for it.
They are asking for that Harvard demonstrate that they have shifted to prioritize merit over identity politics, demanding that they eliminate all the DEI, all race, gender, national origin preferences in both hiring and student admissions. They end the DEI bureaucracy entirely, that there's leadership accountability, restructuring Harvard's governance. Harvard did not like this part. Restructure their governance to ensure clear lines of authority, and that the power should be in the hands of those committed to scholarship, not political activism, because they're using federal dollars. That was a little editorial addition there. They're going to combat anti-Semitism, protect free speech, reforming their disciplinary policies to uphold free expression, ensuring that all viewpoints are respected. And of course, we're hearkening back to, say, the firing of Larry Summers, other economists who have been fired for suggesting that maybe some students shouldn't have been admitted because they weren't ready, and asking for transparency and oversight with regular reporting to the federal government, which is giving them billions of dollars. Harvard.
Erica.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we get into that, because I actually went and read the letter sent to Harvard.
Yeah.
And
we could pull it up.
Harvard is a private institution. And I think a lot of these are very common sense measures that, according to the Civil Rights Act, discriminating on the basis of race, no good. No good even for private universities. It can't be done.
Well, and Harvard likes to see itself as one of the guardians of the ethos of the Civil Rights Act and that whole movement.
Oh, Veritas. Veritas is in their logo.
Truth, right.
But, I would like to bring up, I read the letter and I actually do find one part of the letter actually legitimately hard or maybe even impossible to put up with. So not that you catch me defending Harvard here, but I don't know if this is part of a grander plan. I'd just like to read it. It's the viewpoint diversity in admissions and hiring. So specifically, by August 2025, the university shall commission an external party which shall satisfy the federal government as to its competence and good faith to audit the student body, faculty, staff, and leadership for viewpoint diversity, such that each department, field, or teaching unit must be individually viewpoint diverse. The audit shall begin no longer than the summer of 2025, shall proceed on a department by department, field by field, teaching unit by teaching unit basis as appropriate. The report of the external party shall be submitted to university leadership and the federal government no later by the end of 2025. Harvard must abolish all criteria, preferences, and practices, whether mandatory or optional, throughout its admissions and hiring process that function as ideological litmus tests. Every department or field found to lack viewpoint diversity must be reformed by hiring a critical mass of new faculty within that department or field who will provide viewpoint diversity. So I was trying to research this a little bit. I think for a public university, maybe that would make more sense. Florida's tried it. They've had a couple different efforts. I guess my issue with this, and maybe the broader issue with accepting federal funds to begin with, is who defines what viewpoint diversity is. And if you wanted to have a private college, say, for example, Ave Maria University, would you want the federal government to come in and be like, well, this is Catholic, but we actually want some communists in here, or we want whatever? I actually find that pretty hard to fully cooperate with and or fully even guarantee that can happen. So maybe that speaks to more of the concerns of like, maybe you just shouldn't be. And you see Harvard respond here, how they responded. So sorry, can you continue? I just wanted to make the point. I think there were very reasonable elements to the demands, but also some very hard, borderline impossible elements to the demand, maybe by design.
Right. And I think we'll get into this, but I think it's worth noting that the Trump administration with those demands, one, some of the demands, like you said, are going to be a long shot. But two, to understand that this kind of ideological oversight of the universities has been in play. It's just that it's been in the hands of the left, right? And so I think that the idea that, okay, the government should not come in and tell universities and private institutions what kind of ideological viewpoints their people should have, I agree with that. And I think Harvard should be set free from all of this and should stop taking federal funding. But we can get into that, a little bit more. Just to finish the storyline before we talk more philosophically about that, Harvard claps back. They say that this was great. They're saying no government, regardless of which party is in power. Well, that's a new discovery from Harvard's point of view. Should dictate what private universities can teach. Yes. Whom they can admit and hire. Yes. And which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. Later on in the statement, he says that Harvard will not be denied its, quote, constitutional rights, by which I think he means that they should both get federal funding and be unaccountable to the government in these areas that he just listed there.
Yeah.
So obviously Trump comes back. They refuse that. They say we're going to suspend the $2.2 billion. That's what we saw this week. And Chris Rufo, I think he summed it up really well in his tweet reflecting on all of this when he said, left-wing universities are about to learn why Hillsdale College refuses to accept federal funds.
Wait, I'm sorry. What school was that?
That would be Hillsdale. Oh, is that a Hillsdale?
Shout out to the boys that run the Hillsdale College Twitter account. I actually know one of them. They're hilarious.
They are very funny. Good hire.
I got that Twitter account for them, didn't I?
Yes, you
did. That's where we stand today with Harvard.
From the Hillsdale account, President Obama, we have thoughts on the next step Harvard could take in order to strengthen its position. Quote, it has to do with federal funding.
Well, actually, that's a good snarky response that Hillsdale made to Barack Obama. Barack Obama said, was talking about how unconscionable it is that the federal government would use the federal funding as a mechanism to try to change the way Harvard's going.
That's never happened before.
This is extremely rich because Barack Obama, when he was president, went after Hillsdale and tried to get Hillsdale to cooperate with them and say, well, hey, wait a minute. And it's like, Hillsdale, we don't get any funding.
Right.
And there's different levels of this, okay? Like in terms of funding. So Harvard gets direct grants and contracts with the United States federal government. I think a lot of it through HHS and other, not just the Department of Education.
Right. NIH.
And so like, if you get direct funds, federal funds equals federal rules. That's what someone in the comments said. I totally understand that. Then there's another level. So like, if you get students, like there's a lot of colleges that we know of, like Franciscan University, wonderful place. They don't get, to my knowledge, they don't get any funding from the federal government. But if you get a GI Bill and you go to Franciscan, that's fine. Hillsdale takes it a step further. Hillsdale's like, if you get any federal funds, you can't even come to our school.
No fact.
Christendom's like that. There's a few others. And that was because of a court case back in 1985 where the federal government's like, well, wait a minute, you're getting, the students who are attending your school are getting federal funds. Therefore, we can throw our regulations on you. And so then those schools were left with no choice other than either abide by these regulations, which were ridiculous, or say to every student that was there, Grove City College is the same spot. Like, we will find donors to make up a scholarship for you so you can stay here. And they stuck with it. And they said, we're not doing any federal regulations. There's a brave stance. But again, the point I make is that Harvard is getting direct money. And when you get direct money from the federal government, those come with obvious strings attached. Yeah. If you have students that come to your school that receive government money, there should be no strings. And I do think that is unconstitutional, that you would have strings attached through the funding of students. It's the same thing I say with regards to school choice. It shouldn't, it's the student that's getting paid. You could put regulations on how they receive the aid, but you don't get, not on who receives it. Like
right. That's like a second tier. That's
exactly.
Too far. So Eric, I mean, that brings up this broader question that Hillsdale's blazed a path on, but should private schools take federal funding? And is this, I almost feel like this is a new phenomenon. Certainly not before, I think, the 60s with the
I just been digging into the history of this. So why is it that Harvard is so, and I can get into the percentages are crazy, why Harvard is so dependent on a few $1 million here. The National Defense Education Act of 1958. So this is, and I was listening to Larry Arnn, who's the president of Hillsdale, talk about this history and why Hillsdale's made the decisions that it did. And he said, all this federal funding of these massive private institutions, it's new and experimental in the history of the United States. 1958, we get Sputnik, right? Russia launches Sputnik, and the federal government's like, oh my gosh, we are falling behind in STEM. So they pass this act, and they say they're going to increase funding to private schools for STEM research in particular. Hillsdale turned it down right from the beginning in 1960. Harvard did not. In 1964, so just 4 years later, same year as the Civil Rights Act, all this aid is now sent out to the schools. It's available for equipment and materials to be used in the instruction of science, math, expanded now to history, civics, geography, modern foreign languages, English instruction, and another feature that gives more assistance to schools who are assisting disadvantaged youth, quote unquote. And then, of course, the Civil Rights Act comes in. That becomes tied to federal funding. Later on, we get Title IX, Title X. And suddenly, all these schools are deeply entangled in the reception of these funds. And Larry Arnn makes a great point. He did an interview with Fox Business where he says, the problem is that federal funding conditions the people, and the people should not be conditioned by the government. These schools are not free, and they should be free. So he's inviting them. He's like, Harvard, make yourself free, right? And I was reading just about how entangled Harvard is. I mean, it is a rich, rich school. We've talked about their endowment.
$53 billion.
$53 billion. 2.4 billion came from the endowment in the fiscal year 2024 out of just the interest that they're garnering on that. The problem is that 70% of that endowment and its distributions are restricted by donors to very specific programs, departments, projects, and only 20% of the funds can be used for discretionary spending, like bailing out the programs that are being slashed with the Trump administration here. So the university's $6.4 billion operating budget is less than 40% from their endowment. They've lost a lot of donations in the last year from a lot of Jewish donors, especially. Gee, I wonder why. And Axios, they did this little summary. They're like, Harvard will certainly survive federal funding reductions. Oh, thank God. But it will likely mean changes to operations and financial maneuvers beyond relying on an endowment bailout. Well, no kidding. This is what happens when you want to change an economic system, which Harvard basically is a small country. If they want to get free of federal funding, yes, they're going to have to exercise some creativity and thinking outside the box, retrenching for a while, and then rebuilding so that they're free of the federal government, which I would love to see. I would love to see that.
I can't remember. I can't remember who I can give credit for this, but I remember somebody saying that the United States federal government, we have this ridiculous notion of what government is by your civics class. But if we think about it, given all that our government spends money on, it's basically an insurance company that happens to have a Navy. And Harvard is the same situation. It's like a hedge fund that happens to teach classes.
Totally.
And the fact is, most of the classes, a good ton of their classes that they teach are actually free online. You can just listen to it. Like, you don't even have to, because obviously going to Harvard is half of it.
Right.
You
need to get the credential. That's what you pay.
Right. Well, JD talks about it when he went to Yale, or I think, like just getting to know people.
You get the network. It's the same thing with like going to Notre Dame or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, you get the network.
Yeah. So, I mean, Harvard, I mean, like it's a hedge fund. It happens to teach classes, $53 billion. And this is ridiculous. I know that, yes, there are some restrictions on what it does, but my goodness, I mean, this this university, why should taxpayers, from Appalachia or, West Texas have to pay money to Harvard? Why are we, in fact, borrowing from China to give money to Harvard? It makes no sense at all.
Well, you think about the levels of betrayal there. Like, could you imagine being an Asian or white person that actually statistically has no chance of getting into Harvard based on racial profiling to have to fund what goes on at Harvard through your tax money?
I got to say this too. There was a time in our country's history where, a lot of the Ivies were so waspy, Catholics might be able to get in, but a lot of Jewish students felt like they were excluded. And so Jewish people started their own universities. And obviously blacks have a rich history of, historically black colleges and universities. And by the way, Trump was the one that got secured, dedicated funding.
Right.
Yep.
I really do. I mean, I can't believe it hasn't happened yet, but there absolutely should be some Asians that say we need to start our own universities. And you know what? They would excel. I mean, they would crush. I mean, they would do so well. And maybe it would be created by Asians, but allow everyone else in. So then it would remove the awkwardness of having white colleges, because that's going to look really weird.
Can't do that.
Can I level the main objection here?
Yes, do it.
Is that this federal funding, Harvard, MIT, they have the best and the brightest. The government sends them grant money to research issues important to public health, national defense. Patents come out of here that end up benefiting the public in some way. So this is actually a dangerous freeze of funds that were used for good reasons. What would you say?
Yeah. All right. So I did some digging into these numbers as well. What is Harvard using the federal money for? So News Nation did an analysis of the 2023 report on federal awards from Harvard. And here's some of the numbers that they came up with. This is just a snapshot. So in 1 year of massive federal funding, because it spiked under Biden, what went down? So it turns out that Harvard took about 69% of that federal funding that year for on-campus overhead costs. It didn't go directly to the researchers doing the thinking and the experimenting and replicating. Quote, and this is, they interviewed Benjamin Ginsberg, who's from Johns Hopkins, who said, the grants are designed to do good things, and many of them do, but universities have tried to make a little bit of money on these activities, as we are wont to do. And so they charge overhead on federal research dollars, and that money is not spent on the nominal activity for which the grant is given. So when adjusted, of the approximate $820 million Harvard took in for research on this award, only $248 million of it went towards research, News Nation found. At Columbia, which received $1.5 billion in research grants that same year, only $400 million was devoted to research after it took 64.5% for overhead. Overhead included things like buildings infrastructure and expanding the bureaucracy with more administrative hires. This is according to News Nation's analysis. So some of the money might go for good things, but shouldn't we have more oversight of the money? We basically are asking for Doge for Harvard.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the USAID situation,
right,
where we would outsource important work to NGOs that we had little to no oversight over, especially as the American people. And then all of a sudden we get transgender plays in Ireland. So to me, if we think something is valuable enough for the public interest, why not have scientists work at the NIH? Why not have and remove colleges from this equation? If they're really doing good enough things on their own merit, that will eventually get to the top.
Or if we do want to devote some of our federal taxpayer dollars to things like research and development, to public health, understanding public health better. Like, RFK, he's going to do research into causes of autism, right? Yeah. Say we want to spend money on that. I think the money should perhaps go directly to researchers that the government vets, hires, and is working with more directly than through these massive universities, which are the size of small countries, where it can get lost in the bureaucratic web. Wouldn't that make a little more sense? Like, find the best guy at Harvard, because they do have great guys there. Find the best guy to do the research. help him directly set up his lab, etc. Like find another way to do it that does not mean 64% of these dollars are sucked into Harvard just making a little, or Columbia making a little bit off the top, right?
And
A little
like
bit
Harvard,
billions of dollars.
problem just because like maybe if you would just have a student population that wouldn't just like hate Jews so much and
That
like
would
cause
help too.
problems like that, maybe you
Also
wouldn't
would
have this problem to begin with. But
Yeah.
as you mentioned with these research grants, it provides a lot of overheads, basically subsidies. It subsidizes a lot of other work that's done there. And same thing with these NGOs. It's like the Democratic Party enriches their friends. They provide these subsidies to these liberal NGOs and liberal universities like Harvard. By the way, you know who doesn't get government grants and get subsidized overhead? Your friends at Catholic Vote. You like what we're doing? Become a member of the Champions Club, because we don't have
no federal funding here.
Okay?
No, like I wish we were getting some of that USAID money. Holy crap, I'd be driving a much nicer car. I promise you that. I mean, seriously, there's so many NGOs that just
we probably would have had to pull the Pelosi report.
Yeah, I mean, geez, we definitely would not be saying some of the things that we've been able to say if we had shadowy overlords telling us what we can and cannot talk about. And also I just like research grants to go to colleges that don't discriminate based on people's
that'd be
race.
great.
That'd be chill. Like I feel like that's just a nice bottom line. There's got to be some other universities out there, right? There's got to be some other universities out there that are willing to be like, yeah, we're not gonna, oh, you're white, sorry, can't be here. Okay, so we now have the next. So this was a really interesting article, Erica. I feel like actually broke a little bit. So there's been a little time to sit with this. We now are getting people publicly saying what Tom Cruise got roasted for, 10 years ago in that Matt Lauer interview. It's my favorite interview of all time. Please, after this episode, look up Tom Cruise, Matt Lauer, based on Ritalin. He was right about everything. He looked crazy. He was right. Basically about ADHD, diagnosis of children rising over time, and the kind of free for all prescription of Ritalin and Adderall just kind of handed off to kids. So, Erica, what did we see with that New York Times report?
Yeah, this was nuts. So this was in the New York Times Magazine. So it's behind a paywall, but I'll try and just do it was a very long article, but here's the quick. So those of you who are around will remember in the early 1990s, there was a massive rise in the number of ADHD diagnoses in the USA. It really started to skyrocket. And the psychologist, James Swanson, he was researching the rise of Ritalin prescriptions and amid public protests, Church of Scientology, Tom Cruise, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it turns out that the diagnoses in the U.S. doubled from just under 1 million in 1990 to over 2 million young people in 1993. 2/3 of those children were prescribed Ritalin. So he launched this longitudinal study, one of the largest trials comparing stimulant meds like Ritalin with other treatments for ADHD, like just behavioral therapy, changing the kid's environment, switching classrooms, stuff like that. The initial results that he got in 1999 showed, Ritalin patients showed significantly better symptom reduction than behavioral therapy over a 14-month stretch. That news drops, and what happens? Ritalin use surged even higher. And Swanson himself admitted he was consulting for Adderall. So, in the article. All right. But the problem was, from Swanson's point of view, he's like, wait, why are diagnoses of ADHD also on the rise? Shouldn't they stay about the same? Turns out, so by 1997, we get 5.5% of U.S. children. By 2000, 6.6%. And as of last year, 11.4% of American children, including 23% of 17-year-old boys by their last year in high school, have been diagnosed with ADHD. But here's the other kicker. According to this article, we knew all along that Ritalin wasn't actually the answer.
Wait a second.
Yeah. By 2003, Swanson's study had shown that Ritalin's behavioral benefits fade over time. All treatment groups, including those receiving no treatment for their ADHD, showed the same symptom levels by month 36. That's right. Whether you were on Ritalin or not, whether you received therapy or not, within 3 years, every one of those kids had the same behavioral presentation. What?
Yeah.
Long-term follow. But it gets better. Not only that, but long-term follow-ups have shown that kids on stimulants like Ritalin grew an inch shorter on average with no improvement in their ADHD system.
No.
Short
now
kings,
they can't focus and they're
Gogo.
short kings. Look, I never
Were
took
you?
Ritalin or Adderall.
It's all
I never
natural.
did.
Is that what you're saying?
All natural shortness right here.
So
Short
this
king.
is a great, I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with this.
Well, I mean, I could.
Go
You're
ahead,
telling me that
please.
giving kids speed didn't work?
Right.
I mean,
fine.
literally, it's a cousin of methamphetamines. It's actually a more complex cellular structure, but it's basically the same. They're both central nervous system stimulants. And then also at the same, so there's so many insidious forces going on right here, right? You have the obvious economic incentive for whatever country was producing Adderall, or it's not country, whatever company was producing Adderall and Ritalin to continue to prescribe this. It was a benefit to doctors to diagnose and then prescribe because they were able to make money off this. We also put especially young boys in environments that are not conducive to the nature of young boys.
And to that, it's a benefit for the teachers who have to deal with them, the administrators, 100%. The parents, the parents.
100%. And I'll tell you too, like
adults.
When I was in college, I knew many people who did not have ADHD that were abusing Adderall and all, of course, dealt with the symptoms of feeling flat, feeling not like themselves, not really being able to fully feel things. It was wild. I've had people on it. I needed to focus.
Medicine, it's a drug.
Right. It's a drug. It's 100% a drug. And to think like, okay, in college you abuse it, you can come off it. When you're a kid with a parent who is convinced by an authority figure, a doctor, that you have something that you need this for, you don't have any say. The kid can't say, hey, I need to get off this. Hopefully some are able to say concern. And I feel like another problem with this too, this is the education episode. The system that boys were put into is a problem.
Yes.
I've read some more studies on this. Focus. So specifically what they were diagnosing for with ADHD, especially when it comes to young men, if you get a young boy, something that is truly interesting and fascinating to him, like the thread. So like think like young kids in knights or cars or something like that. They can focus on it. That's not the problem. It has to be interesting and presented in an interesting way, compelling way. If they're presented with stuff in the system we have in the public school right now is crowd as many kids into a classroom as possible, teach to the middle. If there's any disruption, you're inside all day. You maybe have a half hour of recess, if that, and then a quick lunch. That's not conducive to how young boys learn, and
you
not
have
conducive
to manage the boys.
100%.
I want to tee up what you're saying because it doesn't mean that, for what we teach young boys, that it always has to be super exciting and super interesting, like cars or something like that. The idea, though, is education used to have proper education in the United States would cover both the feminine and the masculine genius. It would have stuff that would be of interest to everybody.
Shop class.
Well, not just classes, but like even in the subjects. You know what I'm saying? Like, but what happened over the last?
The Odyssey.
Well, it's like one of the point. I thought it was kind of interesting that the Time magazine cover that we talked about with the wolf, and it was extinct, and now it's back,
Yep.
And so people use that as like a meme, and they said, what were other things that were extinct for a long time? Tomboys, like for example, a girl that would just be sort of interested in things we normally associate with boys. Oh, well, for the last 30 years, we just say, oh, you must be actually mean to be a boy, and let's hack away your breasts or something like that. It's like, no, stop! Like this is kind of crazy. One of the problems that we've had with education in the last 30 years or so is the elimination of men teaching our children. We just don't see that many men.
Interesting.
I think I was like the last generation that had a decent number of men as teachers. Like you go into K through 12, and they're super hard to see. And so what happens then when all the men are out of the classrooms? Like women say, "Oh, I can't believe the way Timmy's acting," or whatever. And like one of the teachers would be like, "Yeah, it's fine. You just need to, let them run outside a little more, or maybe bring it up this way." And that's gone. Like, so that all education, public education through K-12 has been completely dominated by women. And they just think of that they think of these unruly boys as just not acting like proper women in a sense. And it's like, well, we're different. Men and women are different. Boys and girls are different. So I think that's a vastly underreported aspect of what's going on.
Yeah, I just looked it up. So in elementary schools, K through 8, 89% of teachers are women. That's according to Pew Research poll there.
Is that a change in trend? I feel like I almost would be kind of weirded out if I had a male first grade teacher.
Okay, that's part of it, actually. That's part of the reason why. Because if you have like a middle-aged dude teaching like first and second and third graders, people go, is that guy creepy? Because there's been this explosion of abuse stories, not just the church, but Disneyland and everything, and Boy Scouts and everything else. And so there's that creep factor that's a negative influence on it as well. So what happened over time, as men who wanted to be teachers, they would just shift over to, let's say, high school or whatever. So there's a little bit less of that. So I mean, I have no real and first of all, in general, kindergarten, first and second grade, that's been dominant for women for a long time. But I mean, when I was in middle school, I had several male teachers, and like now that's just gone. They're gone. I mean,
do you know any reason for the exodus?
Well, I do think also that, I mean, what the liberals whine about, teacher pay. I mean, that is actually a driving factor. Like if you're a man, like, can you establish a livelihood teaching, for 30 years, or is it better to go into a different profession? So that's part of it. I mean, the wages are a consideration.
Interesting. Yeah, my father, teacher for 30 years, taught middle school.
Right. And you should ask them, like, when you were teaching, what percentage of the teachers were men, and like, what is it now at the school that he taught at? I bet it's at more than half of what it halved.
Yeah. It was really wild to follow the conversation around this article on Twitter and like watch the different stories come out from moms whose sons perhaps were diagnosed with, they must have ADHD. And some of the moms were like, I would not put them on Ritalin. So instead I went to the school administration and said, you need to change his teacher. So they put him in a different classroom. And then within days, this one mom's son, he responds to the environment. And I think that anecdotal evidence is backed up. The article also cites this study. This is great. You're going to love this, Pogo. So one study that said newer models argue ADHD is not a brain thing that has to be fixed with drugs, but it's actually a mismatch between a child's traits and their environment. Second part of that study showed that ADHD symptoms improve in demanding or more meaningful environments, not from medication alone. So if you change a child from a teacher who's maybe more like coddling, more feminine in their way, they don't demand a lot from their kids, they don't really have anything meaningful to teach them, to a situation where there's a more rigorous demand on the child in terms of work, they have more meaningful work, tasks that they find more interesting or require more of their attention, they actually rise to the occasion. So
this is just objectively true. That's just objectively true.
Any parent like who pays attention to their kid knows this. Yeah.
Like I feel like so much of the acting out actually. Listen, there's always going to be people that bring up like the 1% exception.
The bell curve, right? There's always the bell curve.
But for the vast majority of people, boredom causes the acting out, or a lack of purpose causes the acting out. You find other ways to basically try to stimulate yourself if you're not intellectually stimulated by what's going on. And this actually applies at all levels, right? It applies at elementary school, middle school, high school, college. I mean, how many dumb classes do people sit through in college that have no purpose, they're wasting money on, and are just, now probably scrolling through something else on the computer? That's a whole nother conversation to me. But yes, it's just objectively true. For men to feel engaged intellectually in their job, in their education, there has to be value in what you're providing. Right. And everyone almost jokes about this at this point. No one learns how to like balance a budget. No one learns any real life skills. That's one of them. But then I think also I'm discovering now as I'm talking to some more college kids, there's no liberal arts in the true sense of the word foundation to what people are being taught at the college level now, which is insane to me. There's no humanities class. There's no philosophy class. The theology class is suspect at best. I mean, these are actually the biggest questions that people have wrestled with for hundreds and hundreds of years that we still wrestle with because natural law has been written on our hearts. So I think like so many of these problems would be solved, and who knows how long this is going to take. I think destroying the Department of Education is the first step. in starting to introduce things that actually matter, that are actually worth contemplating.
Yeah. So I had one more note that I really wanted to make on this, because until things get fixed, or until we found our own schools, which is probably what we're going to have to do, which is what we're doing. Actually, that's happening all over the country.
Shout out University of Dallas.
Classical
Shout out
schools,
Catholics are doing it.
Academy.
Yeah.
Right. I think that it's really important for parents to be aware of the intense pressures to medicalize every childhood problem right now. And I've been parenting. I've had babies now for 20 years this spring, which I cannot believe I'm saying that. But the pressures that I've seen as I progress through these kids in the last 20 years, it has been crazy. With my last baby, there was like the jaundice issue. We need to treat this. Oh, he has like this issue. You need to come in for an ultrasound. Oh, he has a tongue tie. He's nursing fine. He's gaining weight. No, we have to do surgery on the baby. And we have to be, and the vaccine schedule, we're like, we want to delay. We want to space it out. We don't need hepatitis B. It takes a lot of emotional energy and mental like stamina to fight that battle for your kids. So parents, like, be aware, if you're a young parent, that you don't have to medicalize everything. A lot of this stuff resolves itself over time. It is not imminent danger to your child. Don't put them on Ritalin. There are other ways that are not instant gratification to fix a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Really
beware of the quick fix.
Seriously. Right. Yeah. Beware the quick fix. Get another opinion or several.
Okay. Great segment, guys. We slide. Of course, I'm promising good news every episode, and if I can start, I have fantastic news. The future is bright. The kids are all right. I had the amazing opportunity to go speak to some college students. I see one in the chat here today. Shout out to you.
Oh, hey.
First off, shout out to Stephanie. Shout out to Gus. Stephanie was someone's mom in there. She's a huge fan of the show. Shout out to you. And Gus is a 9th grader who listens to every episode.
Wow,
nice.
There,
which is amazing.
All right,
but yeah, I have a little picture evidence. I was over at Marion University down in Indianapolis.
Man,
he's the short one, right?
Look, I was the short one. I did not take Ritalin. We have a very handsome and intellectual crew here.
Yeah, good.
I was struck. Well, first off, it was my first.
Wait a minute, I got a question for you on this.
I can zoom in a little bit.
You look fantastic in this photograph, and then today you're looking scruffy. What is going on here?
Well, you know,
dressed so nice for weeks. So I had to step up again.
Here's the true story. I went and gave this talk, and I came home, and we had to file our taxes. And so we spent a long time, and nothing will radicalize you more than understanding that illegal immigrants who broke the law were given loaded debit cards and luxury hotels. And I have to basically guess what I owe the government.
Oh my gosh.
And then if I don't get that guess right, the government punishes me for that guess.
Yeah, Tom, sounds like you're racist. Yeah.
Call me what you want. I'm sticking to it.
All right, I didn't need to step on you.
You're dressing down. All
no
right.
worries. Yeah. So I was at Marion University. They asked me to come talk about Catholics and voting. And I will say it was finals week or close to it. And about 15 to 20 kids showed up. I was even thinking back to myself in college. I probably would not have showed up to this. So I just was struck by the class politeness. They listened very intently. They asked great questions. It was a great opportunity for me to test out my first speech, public speaking. I think the hard thing is it's hard to tell what actually is good or bad because they're so polite and nice. Whereas online, I got anime profile pictures telling me exactly what they feel about what I say. But it really did kind of reaffirm there's a lot of challenges that they're facing. It's a pretty liberal university, and I would say legacy at best Catholic liberal arts education. And they're asking some really pressing, obvious questions right now about DEI within their own university, whether or not they will have advancement opportunities. How should they think about voting when it comes to Trump and being Catholic, and what even is this, thing politics we're engaging in. So I'd just like to give a huge shout out to the Young Americans for Freedom chapter there. Shout out to Jonathan Snyder for inviting me there. It was an absolute pleasure. If I'd be happy to do another one, hopefully keep working on my speech and just supremely encouraged by these young people. I think the future is bright.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Marion University is a Catholic university in the Indianapolis area. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's
there's another one that has the name Marion that's in New York that's no longer even associates and calls itself Catholic, but that's a different. I don't want people listening to get confused.
Yeah, I would say ideologically, it seems like we talk about it a lot.
They're certainly not in the Newman Guide.
But the great, you remember the Land O'Lakes Declaration where all the Catholic colleges got together and they're like, what are we going to prioritize? Let's just say the athletic facilities were phenomenal. The nursing program is very big. And I did walk past the interfaith prayer room, and they don't have Catholic doctrine. They have Christian theology, I think. And it said, I spoke a little bit, said, just a moderate amount of heresy in that one. So let's just say that's probably where they're at right now. But I'm hopeful for these kids. They were all very studious and serious and seemed like they took their faith seriously, which is awesome.
The Land O'Lakes statement, what disgraced person signed that statement?
Did McCarrick sign that?
McCarrick?
No way. Oh my God.
He was around a long time.
He was the university president. I think it was the University of Puerto Rico.
1 sec, I got to plug in my computer.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, plug in that computer.
He was the university president. I think it was the University of Puerto Rico or something like that. But yeah, I mean, so he was actually one of the signatories to the Land O'Lakes statement. They went up to Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin, and associated academic freedom with jettisoning every sense of Catholic identity they have. But anyway, why don't you give your good news?
All right. I have great news coming out of Scotland. We had William Wallace, and now we have the Supreme Court of Scotland has ruled in favor of a group called For Women Scotland in a landmark case on the definition of a woman. It just means biological basis, XX chromosomes. You're a woman. That's it. This is amazing. Again, coming out of the United Kingdom to have a ruling like this, really great. The ruling was intended to bring clarity and confidence for women and service providers in areas like hospitals, refuges, which is like women's shelters, and sports clubs, also prisons, where they have had crazy stories about fake women getting into prisons and then raping multiple other female prisoners. This ruling is really a triumph for common sense, sanity in a country where I often question if there's any left. But yes,
they brought this up against the Scottish government, but the ruling is handed down by the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom in London, so it affects.
Right, my bad. Yep.
Yeah,
Supreme Court in London.
Clarify that.
Right. So this is the balance of powers working the way that they're meant to work, and praise God that there's a little bit of sanity. So now women are once again entitled to sex-based protections in women's spaces. So for Women Scotland, shout out to them. They received all kinds of horrible death threats, hate mail, absolute persecution, abjectly miserable social media experience for them, but they stuck it out. They saw the case through, and we had a victory. So that's good news to me.
Good news to me too. All right, back to a little bit of troubling. We got to talk about what's going on in Illinois with the homeschoolers. Oh
boy, here we go. All right, so this is me again. Wow, I'm just like killing it.
You're
today.
killing
here
it
we
today.
Go. All right, so there is House Bill 2827, known as, quote, the Homeschool Act, coming through the Illinois Senate. I believe it has advanced to its final vote at this point, that will significantly expand the state oversight of homeschoolers, requiring detailed registration, documentation, and compliance with instructional mandates. So this is a sea change for homeschoolers in Illinois. Up until now, it's been a freer state for homeschoolers, and they are just taking down the axe here. This was it's a difficult story. So in March, the Catholic Conference of Illinois, which is, all of the bishops of Illinois come together. They have people working on their political, statements, advocacy. In March, the CCI opposed the bill. And I found it was interesting to pull up what they said. They said House Bill 2827 would require every non-public school in Illinois to provide the name, date of birth, address of every child attending its school, along with the name and address of one parent, at least one parent, to both the state and regional offices of education and/or Chicago Public Schools. Forcing our Catholic schools to provide this data violates basic trust between school and family, and also is an overreach of the state. But their statement went on to say, HB 2827 also seeks to regulate homeschooling in Illinois. All homeschool parents will be required to annually register with the state and submit to the same information to the state local education, yada, yada, yada. The bill would require every non-public school to register with the state annually. And it says, the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that parents have the first responsibility for the education of their children. This legislation runs counter to this time-tested principle. Yes, thank you, Catholic Conference, for standing with homeschoolers. Until they didn't anymore. This week, there was no opposition in an April 10th statement that they gave to Catholic Vote. Now the Catholic Conference says that it has withdrawn its opposition because they said they received a revised version of the bill in which private and diocesan schools were no longer impacted. So now the bill is solely targeting homeschoolers. And they said the amendment we received the night before the hearing has satisfied our concern. Our opposition was addressed. There is nothing in this bill, nor in the amendments, that interferes with our right to teach children according to the tenets of the faith. Except, guys, that in your opposition, you said this was an infringement on homeschooling parents' rights. So it didn't address your opposition.
Can I ask, Erica, you've been homeschooling for a long time. What is specifically egregious or over the top about this specific bill relative to what they had before?
Yeah, so relative to Illinois previously, or at the moment, it treats a homeschooling family as its own public school entity. They are not required to notify, they're not required to register with the state, and they're not subject to curricular requirements. What this bill is going to do is open the door for local superintendents, even the State Department of Education, to come in and say, we're going to review everything that you taught your kids. You need to submit curriculum lists about what you're teaching your children. And again, that further opens the door to, oh, you didn't teach them X, Y, or Z. You didn't teach them this, or you taught them, homophobic, transphobic. Insert your favorite Illinois state legislative agenda in there. Yeah. And it also requiring families, especially to submit all of this kind of data on their children to the public school system. It's a massive overreach. That is not the school's purview. If there's concerns,
what would the punishment be? Like if they're like, hey, we think this is homophobic, you can't teach it.
Not specified, but it does say that they're going to have truancy officers notified if there are concerns about students not reporting for state education. So you could have a truancy violation, which would go to the school. It would go to the Department of Child Protective Services in the state. It's very messy, right? It opens up that vulnerability. And the state doesn't have a compelling interest to demand that kind of information about what I read to my kids in my home.
I'd love to do a bar for bar comparison on the reading levels of Chicago and the reading levels of homeschoolers across the state.
Yeah, that would be really
Like, it's not like they're going to bring them anymore.
Why don't you fix the schools in Chicago first?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, I just want to call this out to the Catholic Conference, because it is absolutely in your interest to protect your Catholic homeschooling population. And I just did a few numbers. It's really hard to find numbers of homeschoolers. So I extrapolated how many Catholic homeschooling children are there in the state of Illinois. I wonder if they even did this. So how many children are these bishops the shepherds for? Okay, so post-COVID numbers, 5.4% of Illinois kids are homeschooled after COVID. There's about 3.5 million Catholics in Illinois. To estimate the number of Catholic children under 18, I took the fertility rate, which is really fun for me as a low estimate, because Catholics probably have a slightly higher, but low estimate, low ball. Assume that women of childbearing age are 25% of the total population. Assume the birth rate was consistent over the last 18 years. The estimated number of Catholic children in Illinois under 18, 815,850. Okay. So 5.4% of that. There should be about over 44,000 Catholic homeschooling children who are going to be affected by this bill. If that's not enough kids for you to stick your neck out for, what are you doing? 44,000? Come on, guys. Let's do it.
Well, I feel like there's two elements to this. Like, why is Illinois all of a sudden so concerned about such a small percentage of the population?
It's not all of a sudden.
All of a sudden? I mean,
it's not all of a sudden.
Here's a little history for everyone. The Christians, evangelicals especially in this country, did not get, the conservative ones, did not really get involved in politics for a long time, until Jimmy Carter, in his little giving the Department of Education to these teachers, decided to go after homeschoolers. And it was at that point where evangelical Christians rose up. And that's how you saw the, Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, the moral majority, all that kind of stuff. That all started as a reaction against encroachment, where the federal government thought it had the right and responsibility to regulate education inside of the home. That's how that started. That's that backlash. And so all the liberals who hate the religious right and movement in politics, hey, buddy, you're the one that woke up a sleeping giant. And maybe it was good that you did, because, it spawned a movement. But this is my point, though. The late 70s, that's almost 50 years that the left has gone after homeschoolers, because they have such a power lust, hunger for power, that having 90% of the students going through the K-12 system isn't enough.
Not enough.
They want pre-K. They want moms to, after they give birth, first of all, they don't want people to have children anymore anyway. But if they do, they want you back in the workforce as soon as possible so that they can brainwash these kids. And again, I wish women would understand. They posted, was it Good Morning America or one of these news agencies posted this video of this mom holding her twins and just like crying that she's having to go back into the workforce. It's like, it's a choice. You don't have to go back into the workforce. I mean, some ultimately truly have no choice, I suppose, but a lot more moms have the ability to stay home if they really wanted to.
Right.
It would just require making a lot of financial sacrifices and thinking things through differently. But again, the Rockefeller Foundation and all these left-wing organizations they promoted feminism to convince women that the home is servitude. This is the biggest lie that has been perpetrated on America in the last 50 years, convincing women that they're a slave if they serve their family, but they're liberated if they serve a corporation. It's a bunch of crap. Like, why do you think a cubicle is so much better for your life and existence than to be in a castle all day?
Yeah. I reading.
I just don't understand this.
I was reading this great article by Louise Perry, who she's a secularist, secular thinker who writes against the sexual revolution. And she made this point. She said, the left has tried to convince women that all of those 1950s women's magazines that were like, how to make the home nice for your husband, how to cook him a good dinner, you should wear pearls when he gets home. All of this was just, so demeaning, talking down to women. You were slaves in your homes. Today, what do the women's magazines say? They're like, how to go down on your man, how to pleasure him, how to dress sexy.
Oh, gosh.
And she's like, how is this any better than how to cook him a nice meatloaf when he gets home? Ladies, we have not been liberated. We've just been turning ourselves into sex slaves.
Like the worst thing in the world is when your husband comes home and offers him a beer. Like, that's really the worst thing in the world. Well, and also, again, we said this before, but in the 1950s, you're talking about tens of millions of men who were suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome, and there wasn't really a way for men to kind of talk about this. And so, if it seems well, don't get in fights with him and just do what he says. I mean, that was a large part of what it was. You don't want your husband who just got home from, fighting in Iwo Jima to lose his stack, because he's suffering from war. Because we really didn't have the way to try to effectively tell people, hey, here's a way you can talk yourself out of this and get therapy or whatever. People are like, what? Get therapy? My friends were murdered or killed in war, and I'm going to be in touch with my feelings. It was just not the way to approach these things. But in general, I mean, feminism was, again, a lot of these left-wing nonprofit organizations that wanted to basically just shove women into the corporate workforce to suppress wages. It was all for the benefit of, white wealthy men. It was not good for women.
Word. All right, we go Twilight Zone now. Josh, you're up first. I don't see you have one. Erica's got one.
Well, I do have, I mean, it's, I don't know what we call it, Twilight Zone. I'm going to take this as an opportunity just to ask everyone to pray. So my good friend, Andrew Walther, who left us a few years ago, Erica knew him. He was a champion for the persecuted Christians in the Middle East. In fact, I found out about his death when a bishop in the Middle East sent out a tweet asking for people to pray for him. I mean, this is a guy that almost no one's ever heard of, but he works so diligently to promote Christians who were being persecuted in the fallout of the disastrous Iraqi war. So, and I call him Saint Andrew Walther. The guy was a saint. He was awesome. And I'm asking for people to pray to Andrew Walther right now, because we are facing another crisis going on in the Middle East. We're going to have coverage of this in tomorrow's Loop. But there's a situation right now in Iran where like the last few Christians in the Nineveh plains are being persecuted and attacked, and like they're removing, a lot of these Christians, and families are fleeing already in anticipation of more attacks, and so I think we all should have listened to Pope John Paul II. I was wrong as well about the Iraqi war. I'm perfectly man enough to admit it. That was a complete, total disaster. And now we are paying for that price. And a lot of people have paid that price in their blood, a lot of Christians in the Middle East. And so I implore everyone listening, especially as we enter into the Triduum, there are Christians in the Middle East right now who are scared for their lives. And I just ask everyone to offer the sacrifice, unite yourself to the cross as we enter into the Triduum, pray for these persecuted Christians in the Middle East.
Yeah. Also, still Christians in the West Bank, Palestine, that are still being killed right now too. I just think you brought up a great point.
Absolutely.
I was talking to some of the kids at Marion, not kids, young adults, and I think one thing that I wanted them to understand is you engage in politics, you can engage in these debates, and I almost guarantee any intellectually honest person, you will hold something very seriously, an opinion very seriously, and you will probably change your opinion based on new facts and new information. And it actually is a very noble and intellectually honest thing to do. And it's hard to admit when you're wrong. And I think one of those things that I feel like a lot of people fall in this camp was falling into the rah-rah Afghanistan. We're gonna be the liberators. We're gonna bring peace everywhere. And I mean, I can count on hand now, especially with a lot of the USAID information coming out. Like the U.S. global regime that we funded, you said a hedge fund with a navy in Syria, which we're directly responsible for. We funded Boko Haram. We funded the Taliban in Afghanistan. I mean, we basically propagated a terror regime, a fear regime all over the world, in which we're now causing turbulence. And there's going to be people, think about the Obama drone strikes. There's going to be people in those regions that hate us forever, and they should. And those people's lives have just as much dignity as ours. I can understand it. I can understand. So I'm saying always to now have wait, what?
I don't want to say that they should. It's perfectly reasonable for them to do so. And I think actually one of the things that we've made some amends for this is actually electing Donald Trump president. I don't mean that to be like he's a messiah at all. But the fact is, Donald Trump was able to convince the vast majority of Republican voters this was a catastrophic mistake and we can't do this kind of stuff again. And he has convinced millions of people that, we need a course correction. And that was really a foolish enterprise. Yep. And that's good. And that's good.
I'll never forget when he did that in the debate. I was like, that's political suicide, basically, to admit that. And no one was courageous enough to say it. It's like, look, it was a mistake. We shouldn't have been there. Too many American blood was spilt over there. We made too many problems. And then putting people like Tulsi Gabbard up, who I think really understands and has a great level-headed perspective when it comes to these conflicts. We want more doves in these positions of power rather than just a forever terror regime to be the world's liberator. Okay, Erica.
Yeah, I'll go with my shorter one here, although I would have loved to watch Whoopi Goldberg talk for 45 seconds. But so it turns out Vienna is falling. The Battle of Vienna happened.
This is crazy.
Yeah, so 1683, you might remember. One of my great Polish heroes, I love him, Jan Sobieski, defeated the Ottomans outside of the gates of Vienna. It's a great story. Go find it, read about it. And the battle marked this great coalition in the Holy Roman Empire, and they pushed back the Ottomans at great odds. So, and my book says the defeat was a turning point for Ottoman expansion into Europe, after which they would gain no further ground until the 21st century. When Mehmet II is chuckling in his grave. Yes, indeed, the stats are in. And we have 41% of children in Vienna's elementary and middle schools are Muslim. That's right, 41%. And if you do a little more digging and you ask, well, in 20 years, which families will have more children, Christians or Muslims? Yeah, the Christians are reproducing at about 1 kid per woman. Muslims are like 5 plus. So it looks like without firing a shot, Vienna is fallen. We will see. Can we turn it around? We need another Jan Sobieski. So if you know any good Poles who are ready to go populate Vienna with some Catholic kids, now would be the time. Now would be the time. Or like 10 years ago.
So just run a propaganda campaign of just showing the Sound of Music everywhere all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The Sound of Music.
I do think we need to pray to Our Lady of Fatima. That's going to be the key to her intercession to converting, if there's any hope, Muslims into becoming Catholic. That would be the way.
That would be the best way.
Our Lady of Fatima.
Salvation of souls. Let's do it.
Okay, I have a fun one.
No, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this.
We're talking about it. I've been looking forward to talking about it. Rosie put it on my radar. Everything I read about it was hilarious and insane.
I am so embarrassed to be a woman right now.
Listen, guys, we got girl bosses in space, and it's a tremendous accomplishment. Blue Origin sent an all-female expedition to space, and let's say it lasted longer than the all too well extended music video. It was 11 minutes in space, and the astronauts included Katy Perry, who genuinely, I mean, I'm going to show you some clips. I do not know what drug she's taking, but I can see why maybe
Ritalin.
Wanted to send her to space. And then Jeff Bezos' wife, Lauren Sanchez.
Fiance.
Second wife.
Oh, fiance.
Second fiance.
Yes.
Whatever.
Now, those two were the headliners because following them was CBS Morning's Gayle King, NASA rocket science, Aisha Bowe, who like these actual rocket scientists got like no play because Katy Perry was the centerpiece. She has an album to promote. And then the bioastronautics research scientist and Nobel Peace Prize nominee, Amanda Nyan, and entrepreneur, film producer, Kieran Flynn. I'm going to show you this video.
Win, I think that name.
Win. I'm just going to show you the video. There's nothing else to say. Here's Katy Perry talking about her expedition in her new spacesuit designed by Lauren Sanchez to be glamorous.
I hope they can see the unity that we modeled and replicate that and understand that we weren't just taking up space, we were making space for the future. And for me, like Gail said, this wasn't a ride, it wasn't a destination. It was a journey, and it was a supernatural one. And my journey has always been about love and belonging. And I think that we have all felt that sometimes we weren't worthy or we didn't belong in certain ways, no matter all the accolades, no matter all the studying, no matter anything. And I think today we all said it, like, we belong here. Mm-hmm. This is where we belong, and we feel very sure of that. So I think that you'll never know the amount of love that you have inside of you to give and to receive until the day you launch, because you're leaving all the love behind and you're surrendering and you're hoping that you get another chance to love them again. And so when you come back down, you're like, oh, I get another chance and I'm going to do it.
Oh my God. Now I'm.
That's facts to all of that.
I love it. I mean, did they keep everything, all women too? Like,
No.
It's not a manifest, it's a woman manifest. I mean, did they just go all the way through? I want to know. I'm happy to questions.
Josh, I have some more color commentary for you. I'm happy to provide. So this was actually exclusively documented by Blue Origin's web channel. And the anchors and reporters kept explaining that unlike the men who went to space in the past, this mission was all about emotions.
Oh, golly.
So some of the anchors that covered this were also including Kris Jenner and Khloe Kardashian. And Khloe glossed about the moment at the landing with the words, quote, "It's literally so hard to explain right now." She also said, quote, "There's one woman whose grandfather is back there and he is 92 and they didn't even have transportation back then."
Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed.
Now, if you're wondering, like, what else is going on here? Quote, "Space is finally going to be glam," said Katy Perry. "Let me tell you something. If I could if I could take glam up with me, I would do that. We are going to put the ass back in astronaut.
Well, they
I'm not
certainly
kidding.
did that. Those were some tight outfits, bell bottoms.
Wow.
Yep.
All
Oh
right.
my gosh.
And so, I
Who
mean,
is this
how many layers
afflicting?
of
These
insane is
poor
this?
women.
One, this Blue Origin flight was attended by all these climate activists, and yet it was you had to pay, I think, but a couple $1 million to get on. It was gifted by Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. But it's supposed to be for like tourism, space travel. That definitely damaged the ozone. So maybe the girl bossery was a little bit short-sighted there. None of these women operated anything. It was just shot up and shot straight down. And the whole thing.
I was gonna say
no. So like
they weren't even driving.
No,
they were only in zero gravity for like 3 minutes or something.
See, here I thought you have an all-woman crew flying into space. They weren't driving it.
No, they were riding. It was a ride.
They were along for the ride.
It's insulting to say that, so we weren't supposed to say it was a ride.
Yeah, but you clearly, Josh, you don't understand all the love that you contain, as Katy Perry now does, because she went up and down. I mean, I'm
just still confused by this. They didn't even control the vehicle. They didn't do any of the steering. Nope. I mean, I thought they all went up. All these women went into space because there was no curbs to run into.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, just imagine, Buzz Aldrin.
It was about the journey.
Neil Armstrong. These men who trained and had deep reverence for space and what they were undertaking, spoke very poetically about their experience. And you can debate whether or not they actually made it to the moon, but they went. And now we have basically the equivalent of social media captions and love and emotion feeling on a tourism trip and an intentionally all female glammed up big step for womankind.
Yeah.
With Khloe Kardashian commentating.
I'm just like, you can't even make Katy Perry and a Kardashian. It was overhyped. I'm just, I find it hard to believe.
Poor
How could you make up something? This is this is 8 layers of Twilight Zone here. I don't even, and then also all at the same time, like, remember when Elon Musk literally rescued NASA astronauts?
Yeah.
With SpaceX. Yeah. But this is like, they basically tried, and Katy Perry's promoting her tour. Like, they're like, we're going to go to space to promote a pop star's tour.
I have to say, Tom, this is a first ballot Hall of Famer, Twilight Zone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I promise you, this is the tip of the iceberg. It's like 10 layers more ridiculous. I don't have time to explain. But my favorite part too was all the ladies were getting very catty, all the female celebrities, because of course they're climate activists, right? They're like, this is dystopian. Jeff Bezos doesn't pay his taxes, and they, we're ruining the environment for 10 minutes in space to promote a tour. And I'm like, I kind of agree with them on this one, I have to say.
Yeah.
So
that was amazing.
Do you think that do you think Amazon's going to get good coverage from CBS by having Gayle King go up on this flight? I mean,
I'm sure she probably had some thoughts. Katy Perry came down after 10 minutes and kissed the ground. That was also, she was kind of stealing the shine from the actual NASA Nobel Peace Prize winning lady.
Shocker.
Shocker to that. Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable. That is one of my favorite Twilight Zones. I literally was giggling putting this together this morning. You can't even make it up.
Pogo. It was like out of this world.
Oh,
I'll end on that one.
That was from
well done. Great pun. Fun episode today, guys. If you want to support the show, join the Champions Club. It's the best way to support us. CatholicVote.org/champions. Check out our sponsors, Charity Mobile and University of Dallas. You can, of course, email me, loopcast@catholicvote.org, if you have things to contribute or questions for us. I'd love to hear those. But, of course, pray for us. St. Thomas More, St. Fidelis, Our Lady of Guadalupe. So we will not have a show on Friday. Take that seriously. Go enjoy Good Friday. Enjoy the rest of Holy Week. We will be back on Monday with another episode. And so we will see you then.